One. Welcome back to ESPR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted as always to be joined by Danny. Danny, we've just seen Conor Benn's successful return to the ring after almost 18 months out. Unanimous decision, win over Rodolfo or Orozco. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. What did you think of the fight, Danny? We've seen 10 entertaining rounds there.
Yeah, it was. It was a very entertaining fight, actually. For as tough as Orozco was in his game, he didn't stop coming forward. It was a fairly one-sided fight. I mean, I couldn't really make a case for Orozco winning more than one or two rounds at the absolute most, even twos perhaps on the generous side of that. But thoroughly enjoyed the fight. I thought it was a good performance from Benn, to be honest. I thought it was defensively. I've seen a lot more from him there than I've seen in any other fights, and it's probably because he's in with a fighter who's bigger than him and not a fucking washed up junior lightweight. So yeah, it was good, and I think it's a really good fight for him.
Yeah, I think regardless of your thoughts on the situation, the facts are he's had quite a long time out of the ring now, and he's gone in there with someone who's naturally who is in the weight division above him, someone who's quite a bit taller than him as well, someone who's quite experienced, has had nearly 40 fights. So yeah, like I think Orozco, like he's not going to be a world champion, but he's not a pushover. He's never been stopped for a reason. So it was yeah, it was decent. Thoughts on the 96-94 scorecards?
There wasn't a 96-94 scorecard, was there?
Yes, it was 91, 99 twice, and then 96.
I heard the two 99-91s, and then I made my way down here to do the
Yeah,
video with you.
I
Fuck
mean,
me,
well,
that
yeah,
is
I've just gone on Twitter, but yeah, 96, 94. It obviously
that's horrendous.
yeah, I mean, I mean, two really bad scorecards in the Sandy Bryan Jessica McCaskill fight earlier tonight. But one judge gave it to McCaskill, and one judge had a draw where pretty much everyone seems to think that Sandy Bryan caught on it quite comfortably. So
It's hardly
one
the
of those,
same judge who gave it 97-93 McCaskill, I wonder.
maybe one of those, yeah, one of those nights. Sometimes you have nights where there's two or three really stinking judges scorecards in the same evening. I agree with you. I think I had it 9 rounds to 1, but you can maybe give Orozco another round. But yeah, 4 rounds is pretty crazy.
Diabolical that. And like it's not as if the rounds that Benn was winning, like it's not as if it wasn't clear he was winning them. I mean, he was hitting them with like loaded up right hands to the
Yeah, like
body and
if
to the
you're
head.
yeah, if you're judging rounds based on just who's the toughest, I can understand why you give Roscoe some rounds, but when it came to who was kind of hitting the other person the most and who was more active, there was only kind of one winner. So I don't look. This video is not about bad scorecards, but I don't want just to brush it under the carpet, um, because someone like that needs to be investigated.
100%.
But will it? Probably not. Um,
No.
what did you? Yeah, just I know we've discussed the Eubank fight, and if it happens, Danny, just your thoughts on Benn's weight. It's obviously started his career at super lightweight. Still is moved up to welterweight. Came in at 154. For this fight, looks in fantastic shape. By the way, looks tremendous shape. Someone who's been out the ring for so long. What do you think of Conor Benn at 160 would look like?
No business up there. Like I know that fight will happen. It's a it's a big money fight. I think after Eubank's recent performance against Liam Smith and how good he looked at 160, obviously from a completely different perspective, I see that fight at 160 as a bit of a mismatch, if I'm being honest. I think Conor Benn at 154 is a big push. I think he could, if he got knuckled down, he could make like welterweight. He fought down there lower in his career. He's a tiny welterweight. I mean, I've been around him and Josh Taylor, who's obviously fought at 140, and Josh Taylor is so much bigger than Conor Benn, and it's not just like a height thing. So, yeah, I think as tough as Orozco was, and he 100% has shown he's got a really good chin. I think a lot of it's the fact that Conor's fighting at a weight where he doesn't really belong at, and that's sort of what you see. People don't budge in the way that they do.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. It's just it tonight even looked a bit like a mismatch in some ways with the weight. If I'm being honest, as we've said, are you still even after tonight? Obviously, Eubank fought. Was it three? Yeah, 3 weeks ago now against Liam Smith. Conor Benn's just fought tonight. Eddie Hearn's been saying in Fight Week that they are going to speak to the British Boxing Board of Control next week about that fight. Do you still think that's the one? Do you still think we're going to see that next?
If we don't, it's not for lack of trying. I mean, you can tell that's the fight they are dying for, and from a business perspective, you can see why it's by far and a bigger we'll need like by far the biggest fight for Conor Benn. Like if it's not that, it's just gonna be what just slowly working his way through washed up welterweights again. Like I don't see because I think the Eubank fight they would be doing it with maybe they don't necessarily believe Ben will win, but it's just so big that right, we'll take the hit on it. Whereas any of the other sort of big fights, like a Kell Brook fight's big, but like is it half the money Eubank is probably just about maybe. So yeah, I think they're gonna try. I mean, it's really hard to keep track of what the situation is with the British Boxing Board of Control and the NADP or whatever and all these acronyms and if they're appealed, if they don't appeal. It sounds like if this appeal or whatever doesn't get accepted, then the board won't really have much of a grounds not to license him from a legal perspective. Whether what do you think of the ethics of that is up to you. So gun to my head, I think we probably will see the fight.
Yeah, I think there's a great chance of that happening. We'll just see how things develop over the next couple of weeks. To be honest, I just think one problem that Benn has at welterweight is there are some very good British welterweights out there, but none of them, they're just the big names aren't there. Like, all right, Echo Esserman, good undefeated fighter, but that's not a big name. Michael McKinson, really tricky fighter, but not not a big name. So it's yeah, I think it would be nice if there was an obvious big domestic clash for him at welterweight. But I do have one name to chuck at you here, Danny. Someone who will be fighting at welterweight next year, I believe, is Josh Taylor. Josh Taylor's now, I think by next year he'll be 31, 32 maybe. So it could be kind of coming towards the grander stages of his career maybe. Do you think that's a possibility? Conor Benn versus Josh Taylor at welterweight would be a big, massive fight for both fighters. Conor Benn's going up against a former undisputed champion. Could possibly be the biggest money option for Josh Taylor to fight Conor Benn at welterweight. The build-up would be lively, I'm sure. Just thoughts on that fight happening at welterweight in 2024.
I definitely wouldn't rule it out. It's one that Eddie Hearn has mentioned a couple of times in interviews when he's been asked about Josh Taylor, even after signing Jack Catterall. So it's definitely one I wouldn't rule out. And I think it's a fight I'd probably favour Conor Benn in, if I'm honest. At this stage, I would lead towards Benn. I think Taylor looks as if his best days are behind him. I know he'll maybe look a better fighter up at welterweight, but the last couple of performances weren't particularly inspiring. And I do think at welterweight, Benn does carry power. Maybe become slightly exaggerated due to the sort of faded nature of his recent opponents at the weight, but I do think he can crack there. And I think he might be a bit too fresh for Taylor at this stage. So, as an alternative to the Eubank Junior fight, that's probably a route I would go down if I was backing Conor Benn because it's a big fight and it's a very, very winnable fight as well.
I agree. I think I'd love to see it next year personally, but we shall see. Danny, as always.
Before we go, mate, there's just a name I would like to float to you for Conor Benn, popular man on this channel, Florian Marku. Is that a fight you would like to see?
Yeah, I would do because I want to see Florian. I think Florian Marku is a good fighter, and I want to see him kind of step up and see what he's about. Really, he's not put too many foots wrong so far in his career, or at least in the last 2 or 3 years of his career. They've had beef. I know they've had words exchanged in the past. Again, it would be a big fight. But I don't. It's just one of these names. I think Conor Benn will look at Florian Marku and think, I'm okay. It just doesn't really need to fight him. There are bigger fights out there for him, I suppose. But we'll see. What do you think?
Yeah, I would love to see the fight, probably on account of the fact that every member of ESBR could retire if that fight got made. Yeah, I don't think it'll happen. Like, Marku does really good numbers and tickets in Albania, but how much drawing power does he have in the UK? He's in like a pretty weird position because he doesn't want to fight like the likes of McKinson and stuff and Chris Congo. Like, they've said they don't want that fight, but then Conor Benn is sort of like that level of difference to Marku, so they're not going to fucking just give him a shot. So probably not.
Yeah, you never know. Never know. See when Marku next fights and see what happens. I don't think it will happen next for Benn. Absolutely not. But maybe in 18 months, if they both keep winning, maybe in kind of 18 months, 2 years time, I think it could happen. But they both have to kind of
That would be some build up.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. Yeah, very entertaining. Danny, yeah, good to discuss this with you. Regardless of everything, looking forward to seeing what Conor Benn does next in the ring, and seeing what the reaction is to his performance as well as this one. Thank you very much for your time, and I will speak to you again soon.
Cheers, mate.